Libertarian Left, Free Market Anticapitalism, The Unknown Ideal, by Sheldon Richman, read by Adam Berkowitz. Ron Paul's 2008 presidential campaign introduced many people to the word libertarian. Since Paul is a Republican, and Republicans, like libertarians, use the rhetoric of free markets and private enterprise, people naturally assume that libertarians are some kind of quirky offshoot of the American right wing. To be sure, some libertarian positions fit uneasily with mainstream conservatism. Complete drug decriminalization, legal same-sex marriage, and the critique of the national security state alienate many on the right from libertarianism. But the dominant strain of libertarianism still seems at home on that side of the political spectrum. Peons to property rights and free enterprise. The mainstream libertarian conviction that the American capitalist system, despite government intervention, fundamentally embodies those values, appear to justify that conclusion. But then one runs across passages like this, quote, "Capitalism, arising as a new class society directly from the old class society of the Middle Ages, was founded on an act of robbery as massive as the earlier feudal conquest of the land. It has been sustained to the present by continual state intervention to protect its system of privilege without which its survival is unimaginable," unquote. And this, quote, "build worker solidarity. On one hand, this means formal organization, including unionization. But I'm not talking about the prevailing model of business unions, but real unions, the old-fashioned kind, committed to the working class and not just union members, and interested in worker autonomy, not government patronage," unquote. These passages, the first by independent scholar Kevin Carson, the second by Auburn University philosophy professor Roderick Long, read as though they come not from libertarians, but from radical leftists, even Marxists. That conclusion would be only half wrong. These words were written by pro-free market left libertarians. The preferred term for their economic ideal is freed market, coined by William Gillis. These authors, and a growing group of colleagues, see themselves as both libertarians and leftists. They are standard libertarians in that they believe in the moral legitimacy of private ownership and free exchange, and oppose all government interference in personal and economic affairs, a groundless, pernicious dichotomy. Yet they are leftists in that they share traditional left-wing concerns, about exploitation and inequality, for example, that are largely ignored, if not dismissed, by other libertarians. Left libertarians favor worker solidarity vis-a-vis bosses, support poor people squatting on government or abandoned property, and prefer that corporate privileges be repealed before the regulatory restrictions on how those privileges may be exercised. They see Walmart as a symbol of corporate favoritism, supported by highway subsidies and eminent domain, view the fictive personhood of the limited liability corporation with suspicion, and doubt that third world sweatshops would be the best alternative in the absence of government manipulation. Left libertarians tend to eschew electoral politics, having little confidence in strategies that work through the government. They prefer to develop alternative institutions and methods of working around the state. The alliance of the libertarian left encourages the formation of local activist and mutual aid organizations, while its website promotes kindred groups and posts articles elaborating its philosophy. The new Center for a Stateless Society, C4SS, encourages left libertarians to bring their analysis of current events to the general public through op-eds. These laissez-faire left libertarians are not to be confused with other varieties of left-wing libertarians, such as Noam Chomsky or Hillel Steiner, who each in his own way objects to individualistic appropriation of unowned natural resources and the economic inequality that freed markets can produce. The left libertarians under consideration here have been called market-oriented left libertarians, or market anarchists, though not everyone in this camp is an anarchist. There are historical grounds for placing pro-market libertarianism on the left. In the first half of the 19th century, the laissez-faire liberal economist Frédéric Bastiat sat on the left side of the French National Assembly with other radical opponents of the Ancien Regime, including a variety of socialists. The right side was reserved for reactionary defenders of absolute monarchy and plutocracy. For a long time, left signified radical, even revolutionary, opposition to political authority, fired by hope and optimism, while right signified sympathy for the status quo of privilege or a return to an authoritarian order. These terms applied even in the United States well into the 20th century, and only began to change during the New Deal, which prompted regrettable alliances of convenience that carried over into the Cold War era and beyond. At the risk of oversimplifying, there are two wellsprings of modern pro-market left libertarianism: the theory of political economy formulated by Murray and Rothbard, and the philosophy known as mutualism, associated with the pro-market anarchist Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, who sat with Bastiat on the left side of the assembly while arguing with him incessantly about economic theory, and the American individualist anarchist Benjamin R. Tucker. Rothbard, 1926 through 1995, was the leading theorist of radical Lockean libertarianism combined with Austrian economics, which demonstrates that free markets produce widespread prosperity, social cooperation, and economic coordination without monopoly, depression, or inflation, evils whose roots are to be found in government intervention. Rothbard, who called himself an anarcho-capitalist, first saw himself as a man of the old right, the loose collection of opponents of the New Deal and American empire, epitomized by Senator Robert Taft, journalist John T. Flynn, and more radically Albert J. Nock. Yet Rothbard understood libertarianism's left-wing roots. In his 1965 classic and sweeping essay, Left and Right, The Prospects for Liberty, Rothbard identified liberalism, which is today called libertarianism, with the left as, quote, the party of hope, of radicalism, of liberty, of the Industrial Revolution, of progress, of humanity, unquote. The other great ideology to emerge after the French Revolution, quote, was conservatism, the party of reaction, the party that longed to restore the hierarchy, statism, theocracy, serfdom, and class exploitation of the old order, unquote. When the New Left arose in the 1960s to oppose the Vietnam War, the military-industrial complex and bureaucratic centralization, Rothbard easily made common cause with it. Quote, the left has changed greatly, and it is incumbent upon everyone interested in ideology to understand the change. The change marks a striking and splendid infusion of libertarianism into the ranks of the left, unquote. He wrote in Liberty and the New Left. His left radicalism was clear in his interest in decentralization and participatory democracy, pro-peasant land reform in feudal Third World, black power, and worker homesteading of American corporations whose profits came mainly from government contracts. But with the fading of New Left, Rothbard de-emphasized these positions and moved strategically toward right-wing paleoconservatism. His left libertarian colleague, the former Goldwater speechwriter Karl Hess, 1923 through 1994, kept the torch burning. In Dear America, Hess wrote, quote, on the far right, law and order means the law of the ruler and the order that serves the interest of that ruler, usually the orderliness of drone workers, submissive students, elders either totally cowed into loyalty or totally indoctrinated and trained into that loyalty, unquote. While the left, quote, has been the side of politics and economics that opposes the concentration of power and wealth and, instead, advocates and works toward the distribution of power into the maximum number of hands, unquote. Benjamin Tucker, 1854 through 1939, was the editor of Liberty, the leading publication of American individualist anarchism. As a mutualist, Tucker rigorously embraced free markets and voluntary exchange, void of all government privilege and regulation. Indeed, he calls himself a, quote, consistent Manchester man, unquote, a reference to the economic philosophy of English free traders Richard Cobden and John Bright. Tucker disdained defenders of the American status quo who, while favoring free competition among workers for jobs, supported capitalist suppression of competition among employers through governments for monopolies, land, the tariff, patents, and money. Quote, what causes the inequitable distribution of wealth, unquote, Tucker asked in 1892. Quote, it is not competition, but monopoly that deprives labor of its product. Destroy the banking monopoly, establish freedom in finance, and down will go interest on money through the beneficent influence of competition. Capital will be set free, business will flourish, new enterprises will start, labor will be in demand, and gradually the wages of labor will rise to a level with its product, unquote. The Rothbardians and mutualists have some disagreements over land ownership and theories of value, but their intellectual cross-pollination has brought the groups closer philosophically. What unites them and distinguishes them from other market libertarians is their embrace of traditional left-wing concerns, including the consequences of plutocratic corporate power for workers and other vulnerable groups. But left libertarians differ from other leftists in identifying the culprit as the historical partnership between government and business, whether called the corporate state, state capitalism, or just plain capitalism, and in seeing the solution in radical laissez-faire, the total separation of economy and state. Thus, behind the political economic philosophy is a view of history that separates left libertarians from both ordinary leftists and ordinary libertarians. The common varieties of both philosophies agree that essentially free markets reigned in England from the time of the Industrial Revolution, though they evaluate the outcome very differently. But left libertarians are revisionists, insisting that the era of near laissez-faire is a myth. Rather than a radical freeing of economic affairs, England saw the ruling elite rig the social system on behalf of propertied class interests. Class analysis originated with French free market economists predating Marx. Through enclosure, peasants were dispossessed of land they and their kin had worked for generations and were forcibly turned into rent-paying tenants or wage earners in the new factories, with their rights to organize and even to move restricted by laws of settlement, poor laws, combination laws, and more. In the American colonies and early republic, the system was similarly rigged through land grants and speculation, for and by railroads, for example, voting restrictions, tariffs, patents, and control of money and banking. In other words, the twilight of feudalism and the dawn of capitalism did not find everyone poised at the starting line as equals. Far from it. As the pro-market sociologist Franz Oppenheimer, who developed the conquest theory of the state, wrote in his book, The State, it was not superior talent, ambition, thrift, or even luck that separated the property-holding minority from the propertyless proletarian majority, but legal plunder, to borrow Bastiat's famous phrase. Here is something Marx got right. Indeed, Kevin Carson seconds Marx's eloquent passage, quote, these new freedmen became sellers of themselves only after they had been robbed of all their own means of production, and of all the guarantees afforded by the old feudal arrangements. And the history of this, their expropriation, is written in the annals of mankind in letters of blood and fire, unquote.